December 24th, 1999. A day meant for holiday cheer turned into a day of horror for the passengers and crew of Indian Airlines Flight 814. The festive atmosphere at the airport was palpable, with families reuniting and travelers eagerly anticipating their destinations. The flight, a standard Airbus A300, was scheduled to fly from Kathmandu, Nepal, to Delhi, India. It was a routine route, one that had been flown countless times without incident. On board were families returning home, tourists excited for holidays, and everyday people going about their lives. Each passenger had their own story, their own reason for being on that flight, and everyday people going about their lives. The anticipation of reaching their destinations filled the air. Little did they know, their ordinary journey was about to turn into an extraordinary nightmare. The serene expressions on their faces would soon be replaced by fear and uncertainty. At precisely 4:30 p.m. Nepal time, the plane took off from Tribhuvan International Airport. The takeoff was smooth, and the aircraft ascended into the clear skies. The initial moments of the flight were uneventful. Passengers settled into their seats, some reading, others watching in-flight entertainment, or simply resting. Passengers settled into their seats, unaware of the horror that awaited them. The calm atmosphere inside the cabin belied the impending chaos. The crew prepared for the short flight, expecting a routine trip. They went about their duties with practiced efficiency, unaware of the danger lurking just a few rows away. However, fate had other plans. The clear skies outside were no indication of the storm brewing within the aircraft. This routine flight would soon become a symbol of terror, a stark reminder of the vulnerability of innocent lives in the face of extremism. The tranquility of the flight was shattered in an instant, a stark reminder of the vulnerability of innocent lives in the face of extremism. The passengers' sense of security was about to be violently disrupted. As the plane reached cruising altitude, a group of 5 men rose from their seats. Their movements were swift and coordinated, leaving no room for doubt about their intentions. Armed with pistols and grenades, they stormed the cockpit, their faces hidden behind masks of fanaticism. The hijackers took control of the plane with ruthless efficiency. The casual chatter and laughter of the passengers were abruptly silenced, replaced by the chilling sound of terror. The atmosphere inside the cabin turned from one of relaxation to one of sheer panic, replaced by the chilling sound of terror. Fear gripped every soul on board as the reality of their situation set in. Indian Airlines Flight 814 was no longer a symbol of travel and connection. It had become a vehicle of fear, held hostage in the skies. The once routine flight had transformed into a harrowing ordeal. It had become a vehicle of fear, held hostage in the skies. The passengers' faces reflected a mix of fear, confusion, and helplessness as they braced for the unknown. The hijackers, members of the Harkat-ul-Mujahideen, a Pakistan-based terrorist organization, wasted no time in asserting their control. They moved with precision and purpose, their actions rehearsed and deliberate. Their leader, a man who identified himself as chief, barked orders, his voice laced with menace. His presence was commanding, instilling fear and obedience in both his fellow hijackers and the terrified passengers. The passengers, many of whom were women and children, were herded together like cattle. Their faces reflected a mix of shock, disbelief, and sheer terror as they clung to each other for comfort. Fear hung heavy in the air, suffocating, inescapable. The once lively cabin was now a scene of silent horror, every breath taken with trepidation. The festive spirit of the holiday season was replaced by the bitter taste of terror. What was meant to be a joyous journey had turned into a nightmare, the contrast stark and heartbreaking. The hijackers' demands were clear and non-negotiable: the release of several high-profile terrorists imprisoned in India. They communicated their demands with an air of finality: leaving no room for negotiation or compromise. They threatened to blow up the plane if their demands were not met. The threat of explosives added a chilling layer to the already dire situation, amplifying the sense of urgency and danger. The world watched in horror as the drama unfolded, the lives of over 170 passengers and crew hanging precariously in the balance. News channels broadcasted the crisis, capturing the attention and concern of a global audience. The hijacking of Flight 814 was not just a national crisis, it was a global incident, putting a spotlight on the growing threat of terrorism. The route of the hijacked flight became a symbol of the pervasive reach of terror. The pilots, Captain Devi Sharan and First Officer Rajinder Kumar, found themselves in an unimaginable situation. Their training had prepared them for many scenarios, but nothing like this. Their training had not prepared them for this. The cockpit, usually a place of control and command, was now a battleground of wills. Yet, amidst the chaos and terror, they maintained their composure. Their primary concern, the safety of their passengers. Their calmness was a beacon of hope in the midst of the storm. Their calm demeanor in the face of such adversity would later become an example of extraordinary courage. Their actions under pressure were nothing short of heroic. They were now pawns in a deadly game, forced to obey the dictates of the hijackers. The pilots' every move was monitored, their freedom stripped away, yet their resolve remained unbroken. The hijackers, using the passengers and crew as human shields, forced Captain Sharan to steer the aircraft toward the west. Their first stop, a brief but terrifying refueling ordeal in Amritsar, India. The tension on board was palpable. Hopes for a swift resolution were dashed when negotiations with Indian authorities stalled. The hijackers, growing increasingly agitated, fired a shot, killing a young passenger, Rupin Katyal. His death was a grim reminder of the high stakes involved. From Amritsar, the hijackers directed the flight towards Lahore, Pakistan. Pakistan, initially reluctant to get involved, refused the plane landing permission. The aircraft circled for hours, its fuel dwindling dangerously low. Finally, under the cover of darkness, Pakistan relented, allowing the plane to land at Lahore Airport. Every minute felt like an eternity for the terrified passengers and crew. The world watched, hoping against hope for a peaceful resolution. The stop in Lahore was short-lived. After a brief refueling, the hijackers, fearing a possible commando raid, forced Captain Sharan to take off again. Their final destination, Kandahar, Afghanistan, a city under the control of the Taliban regime. The flight path of Flight 814, erratic and unpredictable, mirrored the hijackers' volatile state of mind. For the families of those on board, the wait for news was agonizing. Section 4. Hours of Agony, Demands and Negotiations. Kandahar, a city steeped in conflict, became the stage for a tense standoff. The hijackers, now operating under the protection of the Taliban, reiterated their demands. The Indian government, caught in a diplomatic quagmire, faced an impossible choice: give in to the demands of terrorists or risk the lives of its citizens. The world watched, holding its breath. Days turned into nights as negotiations dragged on. The passengers and crew, their nerves frayed, endured unimaginable conditions. Food and water were scarce, sanitation was poor, and the constant fear of death hung over them like a shroud. Amidst the despair, acts of kindness flickered. Passengers shared their meager rations, offering comfort and support to one another. The human spirit, even in the face of such adversity, refused to be extinguished. The Indian government, under immense pressure, worked tirelessly to secure the release of the hostages. A team of negotiators, led by Vivek Kachu, a senior diplomat, engaged in a delicate dance with the hijackers, their every move scrutinized by the world. The stakes were incredibly high, the pressure immense. The fate of Flight 814 had become a test of India's resolve. a defining moment in its fight against terrorism. Section 5. Freedom at a price. The hostages are released. After a grueling 7 days of intense negotiations and high-stakes diplomacy, a deal was finally struck. The Indian government, under immense pressure, agreed to release 3 dreaded terrorists: Mushtaq Ahmed Zargar, Ahmed Omar Saeed Sheikh, and Maulana Masood Azhar, in exchange for the hostages held on Flight 814. The decision, though painful and controversial, was made to save the lives of the innocent passengers and crew. On December 31, 1999, the hostages, physically and emotionally drained from their ordeal, were finally allowed to disembark the aircraft. Their faces, etched with relief and exhaustion, told a silent story of resilience, courage, and survival against all odds. The release of the hostages was greeted with immense joy and relief across India, a nation that had been holding its breath. Families, torn apart by the hijacking, were finally reunited, their emotional embraces a testament to the ordeal they had endured. The entire nation breathed a collective sigh of relief, celebrating the return of their loved ones. Yet, the victory felt hollow for many, as the price paid for their freedom seemed too high. The release of the terrorists, hailed as heroes by their supporters, left a bitter aftertaste and sparked widespread controversy. It was a stark reminder that the fight against terrorism was far from over, and the threat remained ever present. The hijacking of Flight 814 was a watershed moment in India's history, a significant event that would not be easily forgotten. It exposed the nation's vulnerabilities to terrorism and highlighted the complex geopolitical realities and challenges of the region. The incident forced India to confront the challenges of international terrorism head-on, leading to a significant shift in its security policies and strategies. The scars of Flight 814, however, ran deep, serving as a constant reminder of the human cost of hate, extremism, and the ongoing battle against terrorism.